Changes in your subconscious and reality start from your repetition. So why does it matter that you're not yet believing in your manifestation? Let's get into that. Hello guys, and hello to any new viewers. I'm Alexa, manifestation coach specializing in law of assumption based coaching, if you didn't know. So probably a lot of returning subscribers and viewers, so hello to everyone. We're going to jump right into it in a moment. You know I like to keep these intros short now. I used to babble on, but yeah, of course we are talking about what is going on with your belief and why repetition, why those practices, why literally just applying these manifestation techniques, practices, getting your mind accustomed with this way of thinking, these new thought patterns. We're delving into all of that today. I'm going to add in that little quantum connection as well into some of my descriptions. So definitely keep watching and let's jump into it. A lot of people, a lot of you guys watching are starting with a negative old story. So do keep in mind, by giving yourself and the timeline grace and patience, knowing that it might take a little bit of time. It's not going to be an instant fix. It's probably not going to be an instant overnight fix. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying it probably won't be. Just manage your expectations to prevent yourself from spiraling, panicking, and maybe therefore even needing these kind of videos where you're wondering, but why is this? What is the answer? What do I do here? A lot of the time people jump the gun. I know it's easy to be impatient. It's a very natural vice for humans to feed into with your emotions. We just want the result and the solution right now. I get it. But by applying the repetition, you are creating shifts in your subconscious mind. That's what you're doing. You're kind of delving into, digging into your subconscious beliefs and changing around the negative ones that have held this old story in place, the assumptions, the memories, the kind of mental block you're currently dealing with. That is all going to change. It needs time. It does depend, what you're manifesting. And that's not to say circumstances matter. However, they will impact your conscious mind, your logical thinking, your emotions, your mind, your brain, your body are all very closely interconnected. So if you had something traumatizing or really unpleasant and disappointing happen regarding your manifestation, which usually does occur with a specific person, or manifesting a relationship, that's usually where emotions are heaviest, you're likely going to have strong mental resistance there. Recent negative memories, anything like that. I've seen it with my clients. I know it can feel like your mind is stubborn and these things don't seem believable. The change doesn't seem like an easy, natural thing for it to come in. But those subconscious changes are happening. The more you apply repetition, the more your brain, the more your neural pathways and even your nervous system is going to respond to that. So in order to accept these new beliefs, basically the affirmations, the statements, the end outcome you're focusing on and wanting, your mind needs that repetition. You're not going to achieve a full end result without that repetition. Of course, if you're manifesting something simple or in steps, maybe I'll give some kind of arbitrary examples, but just to give you context and understand what I'm saying, maybe, if you broke up with your specific person, your partner yesterday, you're not likely in these, 24-hour period to completely spiral. So yes, without a lot of repetition, it is entirely possible, and it's happened many times, for you to bounce back, maybe reconcile, and not immediately panic and spiral, right? A really short period of time probably isn't enough time for your emotional state and mental state to really dwell in that negativity. It's not going to likely create like long-lasting negative beliefs. The memories will probably be there. If there was an argument or anything, yes, your memory will be attached to that, but you're not likely to have impacted your subconscious on a really huge level. The longer you let those kind of things fester and not take full control to the best of your ability of your thoughts and apply repetition of positive thinking, then yes, it's going to get harder. But generally speaking, it is required to have quite a bit of repetition for it to really sink into your subconscious mind. And the way it all ties in is when you focus on one outcome, one thought. I think I'm going to speak about the quantum side a little bit later in the video, so just excuse that part for now. But when you do focus on just one thought, your frontal lobe in the brain gets activated. Now, if I'm correct, that is the part of the brain where decisions are made. You know how they say, what's that kind of meme and stereotype and actual scientific fact as well, that, you know, your frontal lobe isn't fully developed till 25. So people like to joke, you know, excuse my decisions until 25, I don't have a developed frontal lobe. So it's literally part of decision making. It very much impacts the way your conscious mind thinks and operates, but it also feeds into and impacts how your subconscious mind operates. When you focus on one thought, your frontal lobe kind of wakes up, gets activated. I don't know any other of the scientific terminology, but that's how I'm going to explain it. And basically, it's going to make it easier for your subconscious to accept those new beliefs because you're focusing your mind on this one outcome, this one image, this one thought. You're not letting any of that external rubbish and noise and circumstances feed in, get in the way. You're focusing on that end result. That's why SATS is so powerful. It's the Neville Goddard method, where you're kind of getting into like this relaxed meditative state, visualizing, focusing, and it takes time to build up those positive, that positive way of thinking, the new thought patterns that you're feeding into, the way it's affecting your neural pathways, as I said, just everything in your brain and body, the signals that are being sent. It does take time. You can't just click your fingers. Same with learning a new skill. Maybe if everyone remembers from school or university, you know, memorizing information, unfortunately, you can't just read something and then it's, you know, one and done. It all needs repetition. That's the way the brain works. So in order for your subconscious to start running on this new programming, it needs that repetition and consistency. Like I said, it's not just saying something once and saying, oh, okay, well, I did, you know, my manifestation, did my affirmation, or, you know, realistically, let's say even 5 or 10 times, and then saying, okay, where's the movement, checking your phone again, that sort of thing, which happens sometimes towards the beginning, or if someone's really impatient on a time crunch, those kind of things are likely habits. But you want to make sure that you're understanding it is repetition and consistency that is feeding your subconscious mind. If it starts starving and you feed it just a few crumbs of affirmations, you're not likely to create much of a significant change. Do you guys want your manifestation questions answered in a video? If you do, consider clicking below to become an LOA coaching darling, because as a member you get exclusive content that only members get to watch, a literal Q&A at the end of every single month, so you get, on average, I would say several minutes of my time as I speak to you directly in a video answering your questions. So I consider it very valuable, especially that it is competitively priced at just $8.99 a month. And I honestly have no intentions of changing that anytime soon. So you want to definitely join in if you have manifesting questions. The subconscious is actually so powerful, and as I'm explaining why all of this repetition is so important in creating the changes, it's also important to remember that your decisions, the way you think, everything going on in your conscious brain is, and that's why it's subconscious, deep rooted. We don't know, we don't recognize it. It's coming up from the subconscious, right? That reminds me of that horror film, What Lies Beneath. Except this is a positive kind of Barbie, happily ever after Disney fairy tale version, because it's positive. When you feed your subconscious positive repetition, what comes up in your thought patterns, your reactions, your decision making, and your conscious thoughts, it's going to align with that. It's going to be positive. It's going to align more and more with that new story. So your subconscious is feeding into your decision making, basically almost all the thoughts you have. And of course, some aren't. I presume the 5% would maybe be your immediate reaction to something new or something that suddenly happens in front of you. You know, it's not all tied into the beliefs you already have, which probably also explains how new beliefs get created on a pretty regular basis. I don't know if there's necessarily a limit to how many beliefs or how much memory can be stored in your mind. I imagine there isn't really a limit. However, your subconscious really is feeding into the majority of what you're thinking. So if you don't want that spiraling, those negative reactions, you need to start feeding your subconscious with positive repetition. This is something interesting that I saw in some of my previous video notes and prep that I wanted to pick up on here as well, because I don't really talk about it much. But when you are, by the time you're 7 years old, you've actually formed a lot of your kind of core beliefs. And I think that's why, at least for me, and I know other people, and it does depend on age sometimes, but I have memories from being young, like some core memories, pretty much all positive. Some like not ideal memories where maybe I got scared or something, but I do have memories from the age, so I can imagine it really leaves a lasting impact when something new or unexpected happens, you know, during those ages, which is pretty much all the time. Up until the age of 7 throughout your life, at that point in your childhood, you're creating so many core beliefs. So it is very easy, you know, through no one's default or intention to build up some negative ones, limiting beliefs. Maybe you hear your parents repeating things a lot, or see things not work out, and then assumptions can be built up from there. You know, it's important to recognize we probably are starting with some negative assumptions, and when certain thoughts and reactions come up, we need to be aware of that. Same with repetition, it does apply to the practice of a mental diet. So pushing back against those negative reactions. So your subconscious is kind of running on this automatic loop, automatic conveyor belt that keeps coming back around like that suitcase, luggage conveyor belt at the airport. Just keeps going round and round, right? So that's actually a good analogy, where picking up the suitcases and everyone picking up their individual luggage until it starts to get empty is like removing those negative thoughts by applying positive repetition, recognizing what's wrong, being self-aware, so you can say, okay, here's a spiraling thought, here's a negative reaction, here's a repetition of that bad circumstance. Instead of letting the same pattern play out, I'm going to pick up on it, I'm going to stop it in its tracks and say, nope, I'm replacing that with something positive. But remember, your manifestation just isn't going to magically show up. You do need to be able to put in that effort. It's not just waiting around and saying, well, I did this, I ticked these off the list, so why isn't it here yet? Having patience, grace, understanding of how it works, and that you need to keep feeding it repetition. Because your physical reality is reflecting where your dominant focus goes, like I said, with a consistency, I'm not going to keep repeating the repetition word, I'll try and differentiate it, but with that consistency, with continued practice and persevering in it, right, persisting in it, as everyone loves to say in the manifesting community, if you're persisting, then your reality will start responding to that, because that has become your focus. But if you waver, guess what? Your 3D reality is going to reflect that wavering as well. That can sometimes explain why you have experienced recently or up until now negative events, reoccurring issues and circumstances, but it's not permanent. Like I said, once you cut that cord and start feeding, positive, intentional thoughts and a different way of thinking, it does start to change around. Something that's actually really good for your subconscious to absorb your affirmations, shall we say, and your focus in the best possible way, the most concise way, is to just implement kind of short periods. I usually tell my clients, I've also said this in videos, it's not really free coaching advice, but I'd always tell my clients, generally as a minimum, as a basis, especially for like a secondary topic or something extra, 10-15 minutes is fine. That is what I would personally consider a short period of time, a little burst of repetition. So even 5 minutes, right? That could be even better if you maybe struggle with concentration or stress levels and feeling emotionally balanced and regulated. Just do 5 minutes. It's literally 300 seconds, right? Doesn't sound that crazy when you say it like that. Just sit down, close your eyes, or walk around, or get focused and kind of present in the moment for just 300 seconds. Loop your affirmation or loop a visual. That is something I would also particularly recommend if you've really had years of having negative circumstances, a lot of spiraling, wavering, very up and down, and you feel frustrated, and just a lot of negative experiences from the past. Because where your dominant focus is going to go is how you're going to start to see and experience that dominant focus reflected. It really is that simple. Like, what goes on internally is reflected externally. So the goal is to normalize it to your mind, where the mental resistance doesn't push back. It doesn't feel foreign and weird and, unrealistic, and like, that doesn't feel like my life. That doesn't feel like me. So until you can normalize it and familiarize it to your mind, your conscious and subconscious mind, and your nervous system, to make you realize, oh, this is a normal, safe reality. I've imagined it so many times now, I connect to it more and more. So until you experience that, and even beyond that, but that's the goal, you want to keep applying that repetition. Just keep saying and repeating the end outcome, right? Usually it is with affirmations, so that's where my advice has focused on in this video, but you don't need to believe it. It's not about belief, as I said before in the intro. I know a lot of people say, the way they feel and react is maybe feeling like a block, or they're frustrated with that. Why haven't things changed much? But you don't have to believe it. You could still be in kind of like a very nervous or not necessarily unstable, but just for the sake of time, I'll just use the phrase unstable point right now. That doesn't mean your manifestation isn't constantly building up. I've heard so many people, I myself obviously have had situations where I've wanted to apply quick manifestation that have been unpleasant. No one says, oh my gosh, only a millionaire and I want to manifest being a billionaire, and oh my gosh, I'm here on my yacht and I have to manifest. Like, no one lives this amazing life where everything's perfect and safe and secure and you only manifest from a positive situation, right? Usually when you're manifesting, you're feeling disappointed or unhappy with the situation, so you don't need to believe it yet. It's not just about imagining that reality, it's about seeing yourself already being there in the moment through your wording of your affirmations, which I have videos that talk about exactly how I recommend phrasing and using your affirmations, but just putting yourself in that moment, especially visually. If you can allow or create a conscious visual to come up in your mind, even better. So do not obsess over what the results are, whether they're slow, not visible, happening in a certain way. If you're going to obsess over your own consistency. You've probably been taking your current circumstances as the, objective be-all end-all of your physical reality and saying these are just objective facts, which is not the case. It's always down to perspective, right? You might assume, well, this person's definitely like this, but they might interact completely differently with other people. That is just a very simple everyday example of how assumptions change everything. Perception, individual experience of something changes and feeds into your own assumptions. So just because you might think, oh, only this has happened, someone else might be manifesting or even looking at your own developments in your life that are for your manifestation and say, wow, she's so lucky, look at all that movement she's had. So it really is down to perspective. You might also have had that missing link where you just expect immediate results. I know I said that at the beginning of the video. We're finishing up soon, so I wanted to reaffirm that to you, that have some patience and grace. Understanding how it works is the main thing, because otherwise you're probably going to be in a state of unknown when you don't need to be. It's pretty simple to understand generally where you're at, why certain things are happening, and why sometimes it's okay to not get exactly what you want in your manifestation. But you don't want to be one of those people who give up just because you think it maybe isn't working. I also love to see it as co-creating with God. Everything's already been created, everything is already in existence, and applying our repetition just brings us more in parallel, in an alignment with what God has already created for us, the amazing life path. I like to, I guess, not necessarily believe in fate fully, but just know there is a plan and a path for us. There's always a better path to follow to our goals, and you'll focus on the outcome that you want, the life that you want, this achievement for what you're manifesting and creating for your life. With that focus, you're going to draw all those experiences to you, the movement to you, the bridge of events. It comes together naturally. It's almost inexplainable, unexplainable. So it's not something that we need to fully understand or figure out. So persist despite what you might be seeing right now in your 3D reality, because the more you do that, the more that kind of unattainable, unachievable manifestation and end result that feels a little bit crazy and out of the normal realm is going to go from that impossible state to feeling much more normal, stabilizing, being normalized in your mind and feeling like something that you actually can and should have. So I'm going to finish up here.